there folks, Tim Slade here from the eLearning Designers Academy. Over the years, as I've been running this YouTube channel, my free community inside the eLearning Designers Academy, and of course just being, a working practitioner and contributor to this industry, I receive a boatload of messages and emails and DMs every single day from folks trying to break into instructional design. They ask me things like, how do I get started? What skills do I need? What should I be putting in my portfolio? And literally everything and anything that you could imagine in between there. And as much as I wish I could answer and respond to every single person that reaches out, obviously that's just not possible. Which of course brings me exactly to why I decided to create this video. I decided to compile my top 10 list of questions that I receive on a regular basis about anything and everything related to how to become an instructional designer. That way I could provide you with my tips and no BS advice on these questions based on my experience and earned insights working in this industry for the last decade and a half. Oh my God. So without further ado, let's get this freaking show on the road. Hang on to your britches, hold your horses, because we have a lot to cover. So feel free to use the timestamps down below if you'd like to jump to a specific part of the video or jump to a specific question. All right, so let's do it. So the first question that I want to tackle, and this is one that, gosh, if I'm being honest, I get more often than any other, and it's this. What tips do you have for transitioning into instructional design? Now, I'll be honest, the reason I'm starting with this question is because it tends to be the most broad and general question I receive, and it's one that I receive more often than any other. And if you're someone who has thought about or asked this question, the first thing you need to know and what you need to realize is that everyone's journey into instructional design is totally unique and different to them. And that's true whether you're an accidental instructional designer or you're someone who's intentionally trying to move into the industry. And not only all of that, but you also have to understand that every instructional design job is different as well, which can obviously affect your transition into this industry. Most folks currently working in this industry today fell into the world of instructional design and e-learning development completely by accident. For example, I used to catch shoplifters for a living. And then one day my boss came along and he said, hey, you know what? You're really good at catching shoplifters, which I was. And he said, you should be training others on how to catch shoplifters. And I thought, yeah, that would be cool. And, the rest is sort of history. My bigger point is there's no single answer for how to become an instructional designer or a single answer for what tips I would provide on how to become an instructional designer. Whether you're someone like myself who used to catch shoplifters for a living, or you're a transitioning teacher, or you're a former Catholic priest, or you're someone who used to be an online horsemanship coach. And yeah, those are all real examples and real backgrounds from people that I've worked with and helped make the transition into this industry. Each person's journey is totally different and unique to them. But you know what? If I were to try and provide a general one-size-fits-all tip for transitioning into instructional design, it would be this. Focus on learning the skills rather than trying to life hack or fake your way into a job. At the end of the day, hiring managers and employers care about your ability to do the work that you're being hired for. It's not about how you learn the skills. It's not about what keywords you've thrown into your resume or anything like that. And so, the big piece of the equation that most people want to skip or rush past is doing the hard work to understand the work and the function in the industry of instructional design and to learn the skills, which I'll break down in more detail here in a few moments. So all in all, my tip for what tips I have for transitioning into instructional design is that it all starts with learning the skills. If you try to gloss over that or you try to fast track it, nothing else will matter. All right, this brings me to the second most common question I get about how to become an instructional designer, and it's, do I need a degree or certification to get a job in instructional design? Now, the quick and short answer is no. You do not need a degree or certification in order to get a job as an instructional designer. Like I said a moment ago, most folks in this industry fell into it by total accident and had totally different careers before they made their way into instructional design or e-learning development. I have a degree in criminal justice, and that never stood in my way. And if I'm being honest, I'm not even convinced that it was ever actually helpful or worth the $60,000 in student debt that I put myself into. But that's a separate topic for a separate video. Now, with that said, that's not to say that, formal education or certification can't help. The challenge is on you to figure out how it may or may not help or contribute to your unique journey. If you're someone who already has gone to college, you have a degree, you already have some years of experience under your belt, whether or not that has to do with instructional design, then no, I'm not going to recommend that you go back to school and put yourself in a bunch of debt to earn another piece of paper. Yeah, most higher education programs are great for learning about the theories of instructional design or adult learning, but they're really not great for learning the practical and tangible skills. And like I said, it's your ability to do the work that counts, even when employers list, degree requirements on the job application. 90% of the time, you can ignore that. Having a portfolio that showcases examples of your work and your abilities will get you much further in the long run. Now, with that said, if you are looking to earn a certification, I encourage you to take a look at those offered by the Association for Talent Development, otherwise known as ATD, which is our industry's most recognized professional association for learning and development professionals. Now, with ATD, they offer two certifications known as the APTD and CPTD, and these certifications are industry recognized and respected by hiring managers and everyone else who works in this industry. And the training that we offer inside the eLearning Designers Academy counts as educational hours towards both of these certifications. Now, before we move on for this, I should note, be wary of those who have created their own knockoff versions of ATD's certifications. There are a few organizations out there that have taken the same APTD and CPTD letters, but strategically reorganized them to make them appear like ATD's certifications. Don't fall for those scams. They're out there though. Keep an eye out. All right, let's move on to the third most common question I get about becoming an instructional designer, and that is, how can I get instructional design experience if I don't have any? Now, this is, kind of that chicken and the egg conundrum that a lot of new folks in this industry face. The truth is, there are a lot of different ways you can go about gaining experience. That way, you can build and demonstrate your skill set. As you spend time researching and learning about the skills and the tools of instructional design, find opportunities to put those skills into practice. Yes, of course, it may be hard to conduct a full needs analysis on your own or work with stakeholders and subject matter experts, but that doesn't mean that you can't identify a training issue that exists in the real world, whether on your current job or out and about in the world, and design and develop your own set of training materials for how you would solve it. And the great thing about doing this is that it gives you the opportunity to design something from scratch that you can then put into your portfolio and use to showcase and explain your instructional design thinking and judgment. And of course, along those lines, that's also why we offer our monthly e-learning challenges inside our free community in the eLearning Designers Academy. Each month, we issue a new challenge, which includes a real-world case study and a set of performance issues for a hypothetical company. And we also provide learning objectives, source content, and even a style guide, all of which you can use to design and develop your own solution from scratch. And then once you're done, you have something that you can display on your portfolio. And lastly, I'll say this. If you're someone who is currently working in another job, let's say you're teaching or you're working in education, but you're truly interested in making the transition into instructional design, well, the more that you learn and build your skills as an instructional designer, the more you are going to find opportunities to put those skills into practice with your regular job. And, while that doesn't seem like all that much, it is you creating the very experience that you can then put on your resume. All right, this brings me to the fourth most common question I get about how to become an instructional designer, and that's, what skills and tools do I need to learn? Now, I'll be honest, this one is a loaded question because, as I mentioned earlier, every instructional design job and team is different, and what skills are necessary or what tools they use are unique to that team. And a lot of times it comes down to the structure of the team that you're working on and whether or not those who work on that team are generalists or specialists. And I'll put some information down in the description where you can learn about those differences. But generally speaking, what you need to know is that instructional design is a very multidisciplinary type of work, and it involves a wide range of skills and tools. Now, first and foremost, you need to start by learning the various theories and methodologies that guide the work that we do. These are things like andragogy versus pedagogy, Malcolm Knowles' Principles of Adult Learning, Merrill's Principles of Instruction, Gagne's 9 Events, John Sweller's Cognitive Load Theory, and Kirkpatrick's Levels of Evaluation are great places to start building that foundation. And then then from there, you want to move into the models and processes that make up the day-to-day work of instructional design. That includes, conducting needs analyses, designing blended training solutions, creating action maps, writing learning objectives, and drafting design documents and project plans and timelines. And of course, as you do all of that, you want to learn the intricacies that go into the development of the different types of modalities we use in instructional design. If you're learning how to design instructor-led training, then that might mean knowing how to create things like participant guides or facilitator guides or presentation slides, activities, and handouts. And of course, on the other hand, if you're learning how to design and develop asynchronous e-learning, that means learning how to write storyboards or create prototypes and design for interactivity like branching scenarios and simulations. And of course, when it comes to what tools you should learn, we have the basics like Microsoft Word or PowerPoint, but for e-learning development, that's usually going to be Articulate Storyline or Rise, or for videos, that's going to be Camtasia or Beyond. And for other types of multimedia, that usually means learning tools like Adobe Illustrator or InDesign. Now, of course, when you start researching all of this, it's easy to get overwhelmed. One minute you're looking at the learning theories, and the next thing you know, you've got like a 10-mile long list of skills to learn. You have 20 free trials running and a browser full of YouTube videos that you'll never actually watch. Here's what I want you to know. Ultimately, you'll get much further by being highly proficient with a few tools and skills rather than mediocre with a large variety of tools and skills. And yes, that often means you're going to need more than the 30-day free trial to gain an above average skill set and proficiency. Now, a great place to start is by exploring our free knowledge base inside the eLearning Designers Academy. Here we have a ton of articles, how-to videos, free templates and downloads to help you start learning and practicing all things instructional design and e-learning development. Alrighty, we're now ready to move on to the fifth most common question that I get about becoming an instructional designer, and it's this: do I really need a portfolio, and what should I put in it? All right, so the short answer here is yeah, you really need a portfolio, especially if you're someone without a significant amount of experience in instructional design or e-learning development under your belt. Like I said before, most hiring managers make their hiring decisions based on what you're capable of doing, and simply listing skills or keywords on a resume just isn't going to cut it. Instead, they want to see evidence of the things that you say you can do, and that's where a portfolio comes into play. Now, the important thing to remember here is that a portfolio really isn't about building a website, but rather building a collection of work that showcases what you're capable of doing and the type of work you want to be hired for. Now, when it comes to what to put in your portfolio, here's the thing I want you to know. It's about quality, not quantity. When I created my very first portfolio, I made this huge mistake of assuming that my portfolio was about showcasing the broad range of my skills. And so I included literally a little bit of everything from facilitator guides and participant guides and job aids and presentations and of course some e-learning courses and a little bit of everything else. But rather than me showcasing a few really amazing things that focused on what I really wanted to be hired for, which was e-learning development, I had a bunch of mediocre crap that not only didn't do my skills justice, it left hiring managers confused as to what made me unique and special as a candidate. And so ideally, you want to put in your portfolio maybe 3, 4, 5 at the most, really strong projects that showcase your instructional design and e-learning development skills. But you don't want to simply, create something and link to the finished project. Hiring managers care more than just about the finished project. They also want to know what design decisions you made and why you made them. How did you incorporate, good instructional design methodologies and adult learning theories? What was the performance issue you were attempting to solve with the training, and why did it make the most sense to create the thing that you created? Answering these questions in the write-up of your portfolio is critical for demonstrating that you understand how your project might reflect real-world challenges, along with your judgment as an instructional designer. Again, this is a great place where our monthly e-learning challenges are a great way to help you build samples of work for your portfolio. But if you need some help getting up and running, I encourage you to check out our e-learning examples library. Here we have a full collection of different fully built e-learning projects that you can check out and get inspired by. But with a lot of them, we also include details about some of the instructional design decisions and strategies that went into it so that you can learn how to apply those same things to your work. So make sure to check that out with the link down in the description. description. All right, we are halfway done, and I feel like we've barely started to scratch the surface, but let's keep going. So the sixth most common question I get about how to become an instructional designer is, how do I tailor my resume if I've never worked in instructional design? So this question kind of goes back to that chicken and the egg question earlier about gaining experience when you don't have any. And the thing you have to remember is that the goal of your resume isn't just about providing a chronological list or, a quantified list of your work experience. It's about connecting the dots between what experience you do have and how that relates to the job you're applying for. And so, for example, if you're working or have experience in education or teaching, while you may not have technically worked in the job or in a job with the title of instructional designer, that doesn't mean you don't have experience with the practices of instructional design. Things like, curriculum design, training development, facilitation, and evaluation are all things that you do have experience with. It's just that the context and the semantics are different, and that's totally okay. What you want to avoid is just listing past job duties. Instead, focus on listing relevant skills and quantifying the results of your work. For example, something like designed, developed, and facilitated interactive training modules for 500 plus learners is a very, action-driven and quantified statement that you could put in your resume. What you want to avoid when it comes to tailoring your resume is putting too much focus on stuffing in keywords or relying too much on AI to do all of the work for you and help you optimize it for the ATS. And speaking of that, here's what you need to know about that. Every company uses an ATS system, but very, 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 very few companies are using the ATS system to auto-reject resumes based on keywords or formatting. So don't allow yourself to get, sucked into these weird superstitions and rules about making your resume ATS compatible. Write your resume for the human reviewer and make sure you understand what you're putting in your resume. At the end of the day, if you get called for an interview, then you need to be prepared to get asked and answer questions about the shit you've put in your resume. So make sure you understand what you've put in there and write it for the human. All right? Okay, we're moving on to the seventh most common question I get about transitioning into instructional design, and it's this. Is the instructional design job market too competitive? Is it overly saturated? This is another question where the answer is very nuanced and requires a little bit of perspective. So first, is the market competitive? Yeah, the market's competitive with a lot of folks, both new and experienced, trying to land work. But that's also the nature of the beast when it comes to the private sector. And of course, how competitive the market really is depends on the jobs you're applying for and the area in which you live. The nuance here is that while there is a saturation of people out there saying that they're trying to get into instructional design, really only a small percentage of those people are doing the work necessary to actually be competitive, capable, and successful. And so if you're putting forth the effort to learn the skills, demonstrate those skills in a portfolio, build your network, and you're being strategic and specific about the jobs you're applying for, then, that barrier to entry is much lower than it appears on the surface. But, here's the thing. I don't want you to think that making the transition or becoming an instructional designer isn't going to take time and determination and effort. What you can't allow yourself to do is get disillusioned by all of the BS noise out there that makes it sound like becoming an instructional designer is something that you can do, overnight or simply by learning a handful of skills and tools. As I shared earlier, every person's journey is different and unique to them. For example, I have worked with folks inside the eLearning Designers Academy who landed their first instructional design job after it was the very first job they applied for. It only took them literally a few weeks. And I have worked with folks where it took them well over a year. Ultimately, if getting into this industry is something that you're truly interested in and you have a passion for, you'll figure out how to make it work. There's always going to be ups and downs in the job market, and there's always going to be people to compete against who are doing it better than you. All right. That brings me to the eighth most common question I get about how to become an instructional designer, and it's how much do instructional designers make? Is it realistic to land a six-figure, fully remote job? Okay, so here's the thing about this question, or questions. There are so many different variables that go into how much you might earn as an instructional designer. There's no one-size-fits-all answer. Salaries will vary depending on location, based on industry, and the company itself. On the low end, I've seen some instructional designers make as little as $50,000 a year. And on the high end, I've seen some people make as high as $200,000 per year. And so, I know this isn't the answer you want to hear, but it depends. Currently the national average is somewhere between 85,000 and 95,000 US dollars. Some jobs do reach the $100,000 mark, but those are either for senior level roles or ones that are located in high cost of living areas like, Seattle or the Bay Area or New York City. And they're usually at tech companies. What I want you to know is that, the whole idea that you're going to land in this industry and find a six-figure, fully remote entry-level job is rare and highly competitive and almost non-existent. Most six-figure jobs come with six-figure expectations and with candidates who have six-figure experiences under their belt. And so it's important to manage your expectations here. If you're able to, you can make your life a lot easier by focusing on in-person or hybrid openings in your local area. That way, you're not competing with everyone else across the country. And the final thing that I'll say is that, if there's anyone out there making claims or suggestions or selling the idea, literally selling the idea about achieving financial freedom, easily making six figures, tripling your salary, or anything else that sounds too good to be true, well, gosh, that's because it is. The only people who are achieving financial freedom in this industry are those who are selling that lie to others and to those who are buying it, literally. Okay, don't fall for that. All right, we're almost at the end. Now, the 9th most common question I get about how to become an instructional designer is, what's the best way to network and connect with others in this industry? Now, I love this question because, networking is one of those things that most folks get wrong, but it's also one thing that can have the biggest impact on the success of your career. And I cannot overstate this enough. Building a strong network, making and building relationships, interacting with other practitioners in this industry is a value-added investment of your time and a value-added investment in your career. However, there are some things that I think most people get wrong about networking. First off, they only network and connect with those who are on the same journey as they are. Second, they treat networking like a transaction. And third, they invest all of their networking on influencers rather than practitioners. So yes, it's great to network and connect with people that, you can relate to and who are on the same journey as you. And yes, it's great to follow a few influencers and talking head people like myself, but you really need to make sure you're balancing all of that by networking and connecting with people who are doing the shit you want to be doing. These are real world practitioners who actually work in this industry. And here's what I want you to remember. When you do reach out and connect with these folks, don't treat it like a transaction. Don't reach out to a random stranger and ask for their time, or randomly send over your resume or portfolio and ask for feedback without an introduction. Trust me, as someone who has been on the receiving end of that a lot, it's not fun. Instead, focus on building a relationship. Read what they've been posting online. Comment and share your thoughts. Like their stuff. And when you do have a specific question to ask, let them know how much you've enjoyed engaging with what they've shared. Trust me, those small little efforts will go a long way to building some rapport and credibility with that person, and it will increase your chances of getting a response. Now, beyond all of that, when following various internet influencers, please make sure they actually have the experience to be talking about the stuff that they're talking about. If they've never actually worked in this industry or the industry in which they're talking about, are they really in a position to be giving you advice on how to succeed? Use your critical thinking skills here, people. And of course, finally, don't underestimate the value of networking locally. I encourage you to attend or get involved with your local ATD chapter. Most of them host monthly networking and learning events. And, these are all great ways to connect and get face time with local practitioners, and more importantly, face time with local hiring managers. All right, we're finally at the end here with the 10th most common question I get about getting started in the world of instructional design. And it's this: will AI replace the need for instructional designers? Should I still pursue this as a career? Well, gosh, my goodness. Let me see if I can't find my crystal ball so that I can tell you the future. I don't know where, I must have misplaced it. Here's the thing. I can't tell you what the future holds for this industry. And frankly, I don't think anyone really knows either. AI is super exciting with a lot of possibilities. Is it going to change the way that we work? Yeah, and that's going to be true for everybody who's working in any industry. But is it going to replace the need for, human instructional designers? I don't think so. And I don't think so anytime soon. You have to remember that AI is just a tool, one that can help you as an instructional designer do your job better and faster. But at the end of the day, AI is only as good as the person behind it directing it and telling it what to do. AI can't replace critical thinking. AI can't replace human design skills. It can't understand what the business needs. It can't manage stakeholders and subject matter experts, and it cannot design and develop a complete learning experience on its own. The thing that you need to know about AI is that while it might change the way, we actually develop a training or learning experience, the stuff that goes into designing an effective learning experience, those learning theories and methodologies I talked about earlier, it doesn't change or negate any of that. AI might change the way we create a learning experience and how our learners might consume a learning experience, but it doesn't change how learning happens fundamentally and the things that go into designing a good and effective learning experience. Now, does that mean you should totally disregard AI? Absolutely not. It's something that you need to explore and learn, but it's also something that's rapidly changing. And a lot of what you learn today about AI will probably be obsolete tomorrow. So, you should learn it, but you have to be thoughtful about how much you're reacting to it. All right. My goodness, we covered a ton of ground in this video, and I know it was a lot to take in, but hopefully this video helped answer some of those common questions that I know a lot of you have. A lot of you have reached out to me and asked, so I hope this helped. Of course, if there's a question I didn't tackle, or if you have some follow-up questions, please, by all means, feel free to throw them down in the comments, and I will do my best to respond. And while you're down there, check out the links that I put down in the description for all of those free resources inside the eLearning Designers Academy to help you get started with instructional design and e-learning development. Otherwise, I want to thank you so much for watching. If you haven't done so already, please make sure to hit that like, subscribe, and bell button to get alerted the next time I publish a video just like this one. And of course, join us inside our free community inside the eLearning Designers Academy at elearningacademy.io. It's a place where we help new instructional designers and e-learning developers grow their careers by focusing on skills first. That thing I talked about at the beginning of the video. Otherwise, my name is Tim Slade, and until next time, I'll see you around.